So I get a lot of questions, emails, and even live coaching sessions about this idea of moving on, right? A lot of people going through breakups, what I call an expired relationship, and they want to move on. By the way, real quick, as an insert, I call relationships expired because it's a reframe. It's a way to look at the breakup. It's not me intentionally minimizing what happened, because I don't think we should minimize anything or discredit or discard parts of our story, right? So when I say expired relationship, it's a reframe to help someone, quote unquote, move on, move forward, and accept. I'm not comparing relationships to milk, okay? So all relationships, I think, are important and beautiful and part of life, and they're what makes us human, right? So whether they are good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's really about the imprint and the evolution of you because of the relationship, right? That's the goal. That's the beauty of the human exchange, the human collision, if you will. So that's what I mean by expired. Anyway, going back to this idea of moving on from a relationship, I think instead of asking yourself how to move on from this, what if you ask yourself, how can I move with? And let me explain. So when someone says, I need to move on from this, how do I move on from this breakup? It's very loaded, because one, there's a ticking clock you're putting on the situation, because you're saying I need to move forward. You're saying that this is my life is not going to happen or continue until I get over this, right? Also, by saying that you want to move on, you're also subtly saying that you want to rip this chapter out, right? You want to return. You want to, and I get it. There are relationships that are toxic and abusive and extremely painful, right? So I get that you want to ignore that, rip it out. It's filled with shame, guilt, hurt, of course. But the more that you want to rip out chapters of your story, the more you are amplifying it, right? It's like your resistance is what causes it to not move on, if that makes sense, right? Your resistance to accept it and what happened is what's creating it to glow, what's creating it to be carried on your back. So instead of moving on, maybe ask yourself, how can I move with? And the way that you'd move with is to accept what happened, right? Good or bad, whatever, and know that because of what happened, it's contributed to the evolution of you, right? So you are who you are today. You are what you know today. Everything because of that experience. So moving on means you are negating that, subtracting that, running from that, and usually running from yourself. When you say I'm moving with, you are now accepting your story, which I believe is the most powerful thing, valuable thing you will ever own. You are embracing, and by doing so, you are dissolving and quote unquote moving on. So you're moving with, right? You're not carrying the person, you're carrying what happened from that, and how that's changed you and how that's impacted you and the lessons that you learned. That's what you're carrying. That's what you're taking with you, right? You're not taking the person. So you are technically moving on from the person, but by saying that you are moving with, then you stop this whole ripping out your chapters and denying, and instead you start to accept, right? And once you start to accept is when you start to begin the healing process. If you're holding on to resentment and anger, you're not healing. You are walking with stones in your shoe, right? So instead of saying, how am I going to move on with panic, say, how can I move with? How can I take parts of these love lessons that I've learned and become better and expand and love harder and be a healthier person and bring that to the table in my next relationship, right? So you're moving with, you're not moving on. And if you didn't have a toxic relationship, but maybe it was just a great relationship, but it was just sad and feelings changed and people, drifted, great. You're still moving with the experience of that and what you've learned, Our human collisions, every single one of them, whether they be friendships or mentorships or romantic relationships, it doesn't matter. Each human collision has beauty and lessons, and that's part of the magic of being human and engaging with each other, right? If not, then what is life? Just us hurting each other and leaving with resentment and anger? No, it's not. It's finding, it's colliding with people, and through those collisions, stretching ourselves, connecting back to us, learning, growing, and evolving. And that, to me, means moving with, not moving on.